Morning. Want to thank everybody for jumping on this morning with us, and for the people that are here. What we want to do today, and the whole purpose of today is hopefully for somebody to get something positive out of a couple of hours that we're together that can improve your practice. So we want to try to make it as interactive as possible. Vince, who is our advisor liaison, tells me that if you have a question, that you can just type it in, we'll see it, and then either I'll address it when the question comes, or if I know that it's something I'll answer, I'll wait. So please feel free. We want it to be interactive. If you can't get your questions answered, then I think the whole purpose of today won't be accomplished. I just want to take like 2 minutes. So Bleakley Financial Group, $5.5 billion of assets. We have, by the end of the summer, we'll have six. I'm sorry? We'll have 6 locations around the country. We are sort of in growth mode. We are interested in growing the firm, and we're pretty excited about that opportunity. I want to talk about 3 things today. We'll talk for a while, but there are going to be 3 main factors. I think there's 3 factors that really control, what's happening in your practice and my practice, if you wanted to break it down. Expectations is one. Life is played between the ears. I think everybody knows that. It's in our business. It's in every business. It's in politics. It's even in sports. Sports is this physical thing that you would think is all about who's bigger, who's stronger, who's faster. And I don't care whether it's 6-year-old girls, playing soccer, or whether it's, guys playing for the NBA championship, last night. I think they did. That's over. Yeah, over. Toronto won, right? Yeah, because I don't really pay attention. But I guarantee you that the guys that won and the guys that won, the Blues that won the night before, it wasn't necessarily 100% about who's better physically. I think it was probably just as much about who got on the ice or who got on the court that night and believed that they were going to win that game and thought that they understood how that was going to happen. And our business is so much like that. Your lives are being controlled by your thoughts, your expectations, what you believe. And I think that, so that's important. We're going to talk about that today. The other is activity. Maybe you want to call it work. People like to use the word work ethic. Unfortunately, you can't get away from the notion that work and what we do every day has to have a big impact on the outcome of what's happening here. Everybody wants to manage results, but the reality is we shouldn't be managing results, we should be managing activity, because activity we can control, our work we can control, the result, the universe will provide, from there. And then the last thing, and maybe the most important, I think it's the thing that can be most differentiated depending on where you are, what institution you work with, the people you work with, the environment you're in, is your capacity. And I think capacity sometimes, and sort of this idea of expectation or mental capacity or going into the marketplace really strong, has something to do with your capacity. When I talk about capacity, when I go out on a meeting, I know that my work and the people that are putting my work together are as smart, and that work is as good or better than anybody's work, in the business, anyone that I might be competing against. I know that when I compete, I win most of the time, not necessarily because I'm smarter, because I'm not, and we'll get into that in a little while, because I can prove it. But the reality is the quality of the work, the depth of the work. And I would argue that if you go into a meeting and you know that your work is really as good or better than everybody else's work, your whole mindset, your confidence, your chances of getting that case are substantially greater. And so we're going to talk a lot about capacity today. How do we build capacity? How do we leverage capacity? Okay, so with that said, everybody's given up a couple of hours. Maybe we'll be here for a couple hours today. The goal will be that if we find that this is helpful, if the feedback is positive, I'm happy, and we're happy to put together like a quarterly, kind of a program, for people that might have missed. We'll obviously change topics. We'll be asking for questions and topics for people that they want to cover, and we're happy to do that. So that will be something, going forward. So for the next 2 hours, we're here, you're wherever you are. If you're from the West Coast, it's really early in the morning. So I say kudos for you for getting up early, but you're not giving anything up, because you'd either be sleeping or maybe you're giving up a workout this morning. For the people that are on the East Coast, it's beautiful outside. I know where I'd be this morning. I'd be at the beach. And I guess all of you guys would be somewhere else as well, and maybe some people that were going to be on the call aren't. Maybe they decided to do the other anyway. So what I would say is this. If we're going to spend the next couple hours, let's all be present, right? Let's all just turn off our phones, let's turn off the TV, let's shut our door, And I want you to do two things. Be present, because unfortunately, most people spend way too much time not being present. We are there, but we're not present, whether it's at work or whether it's with our families or wherever. We're always somewhere else. And the second thing I would say is that you don't really know me, but let's just assume for 2 hours that what I'm saying is true. When you walk out or when you turn off your computer, you could say, that guy is so full of shit. I don't think anything he said was true. But for the next 2 hours, let's just open up our minds and let's just assume that what I'm saying is true, that it's worked, that it's how I built my business, and that it could work for you. And then after that, you do what you want with it. Okay, so and then the ground rules. Let's send in questions if you have them. Okay. So I think the best place to start is kind of in the beginning, right? And to give some context to the conversation. So for the Northwestern people that might be on the line, some of you, might or might not, know the story, right? I went to Glassboro State College, and I went to Glassboro State College in 1980. And I went to Glassboro State College for two very important reasons. I had really low SAT scores, and my brother will say that I didn't crack 1,000. The myth is I did, but we're not sure. It's been a long time, so we're not sure where we were. And the second, because we had no money. Scott and I grew up very, kind of lower middle class, which was a blessing. And there was no money, and nobody went to college. And the idea that you were going to go search for colleges, or that somebody was going to spend thousands of dollars, to go to college wasn't, in the program. So we went to Glassboro State College. My first experience was I was in Hawthorne Hall, and I remember getting there. We were on the second floor, and when we came down the back hallway, there were already a bunch of people moved in because we had gone in for orientation, so everyone's moving in. But there were a bunch of guys who were already there, and they were there because they were learning how to do basic math and basic reading and writing, right? I think they called them the EOS students, right? So here's the thing. If you think that some people can be very, very successful because they're really, really smart, okay, the good news is that that's not me, okay? I'm not an Ivy League educated guy. I'm not a particularly high IQ guy. That's not the deal. I understand my business, but wherever you're coming from, I know people sometimes feel like if they come from a certain place, if they didn't go to college, then they can't be successful, and nothing could be farther from the truth. So the good news is that probably everybody involved in this thing this morning is probably smarter than me. The bad news, though, is because there's always two parts to a story. The bad news is I worked really, really hard at this, right? I've spent a lot of time and a lot of energy, and we'll talk about activity in a second, but I really work hard. So this is a very simple business, I think, for everybody, but it's not an easy business, right? But if you're willing to do the work and if you're willing to do certain things, then we have an unlimited opportunity, and we'll talk about our opportunity. So how did I get here? And I got here by accident, like all of you guys. I bet if we all had a chance to talk for 10 minutes this morning, and I'm sure it would be really interesting, we would probably find that nobody went to college and majored in insurance or investments, or was a CFP. Today they have CFP majors, but not in my generation. And so I got into this business by accident. So my senior year, hey Ricky, my senior year in college, I had been working in a restaurant for the last 3 years, and I had a little bit of a disagreement with the guy that owned the restaurant, and I was paying for school. I was making pretty good money. And I happened to be living with a general agent with Fidelity Union Life, okay? And this is kind of wacky, and I don't know if they still exist, but Fidelity Union Life had a concept that they were on college campuses, and they sold life insurance to college seniors on a note. So we literally said, okay, you buy Pat, I'm going to sell you this $100,000 of insurance. You don't have to pay for it for a year. You're going to sign a note. The note had some interest, and they paid me a commission. And they paid me like $800 for every one of these $100,000 policies I sold. Kind of crazy. So I remember going home after I had my little dispute with my boss, and my ex-wife is living with Steve Anishesky, the general agent with Fidelity Union Life in Glassboro, New Jersey, which was a storefront in Glassboro, New Jersey. It was us, the hair salon, and the post office. And it was a very sophisticated operation. You needed to make copies of your applications. You went down to the post office with 5 nickels, and you put your nickels in, and you got your copies. It was 4 metal desks in the front. It was Steve's office, very nice, what is that, wood paneling, from 1970, whatever. And in the back was the closing room. So I go home and I say, I got to go back to ground round and start hustling hamburgers my senior year, which really was annoying. And Steve said, why don't you come work for me? every senior on campus. I'm thinking to myself. So in August or July and August of, I guess, 1983, I'm sitting on the beach in Ocean City, New Jersey, and I'm reading, I'm preparing for my life insurance exam. And in those days, you did it in a book because, nobody had computers. And you had that little red plastic thing that you put on the side so you could see the answers. And so I sat for my insurance exam, and I basically started selling life insurance as a college senior. Now, it was not expected, but what I found was that if I called a bunch of people and I sat down with a bunch of people, then some of these people would say yes. And every time somebody said yes, I made $800. So by like October, November, I'm making like, $3,000-4,000 a month. It's 1983. I'm a senior in college. My cost of school was probably $2,000 a semester. My brother Scott, who's my twin, is actually selling clothes at John Wanamaker. He's selling suits, $20 an hour. $20 an hour. He's working 20 hours a week. He probably made $40,000 his senior year. So he was the successful one, right? We both had cars. We funded our fraternity, whatever. And so the work was kind of weird, right? Like I remember when we came up to New Jersey, North Jersey, to interview with really what is still the firm, what was the beginning of this firm. And Scott was a pretty good prospect. Scott thought that he wanted to be a sales trainer, goes to interview with a sales trainer. The sales trainer says, I don't hire people that never sold anything or never been out of college or been in the workforce, which kind of makes sense if you're going to be a sales trainer, that you might be out of college. And but she said, but we know a group of people that have this financial firm in Fairfield, New Jersey, and they're looking for college kids, or for people coming out of college. So he went up there to interview. They loved him, obviously. He was a great prospect. And then he said, yeah, you might want to talk to my brother, though, because I think he sold like 50 life insurance policies, because this is like by April or May of, senior year. So I come up just because, since I'm in the business, I'm going to, counsel my brother, because, I'm not going anywhere. I'm making a fortune, in Gloucester State College selling college seniors life insurance. It gives me the chills every now and then. I wake up, it's like a nightmare. And I sign for all those notes. So anyway, we fast forward this thing. We both come up, we interview. And obviously, we both joined the firm in 84. So 1984, we joined the firm, and it is a life insurance practice. Diversified multiple streams of revenue to us in 1984, where if you sold a life insurance policy and a disability policy, or if you sold a life insurance policy to a husband and a life insurance policy to a wife and maybe a juvenile policy, now you're really cooking, and you've got this multiple stream of revenue going, and you're killing it, right? And that was kind of the world. That world for us existed for quite a while. We probably didn't get into the investment business in earnest for 15 years. Now, sometimes, I regret the start, because I think that if I would have gone to, a UBS or a Merrill Lynch or even independent RIA, although they didn't exist at that time, and got into the business first, instead of having $1.3 billion, I'd probably have $5 billion, and we'd probably be done. But on the other side, though, I'm grateful that we started the way we did, because the culture was a culture of planning. It was a culture of asking questions. It was a culture of taking care of people's needs, obviously on the life insurance side. But it was a really good education for us, and we believe that the business today is 100% about planning, so it was a great background for us. So about 20 years ago, we really decided, and we figured out, and we'll talk about what our transition was and how we did it. So anyway, so we get here. And then the next thought was, and I'll start with this thought about expectations. So now, I'm in the life insurance business, and no matter how much money, I made, it wasn't particularly enough, So I'm 3 years in the business. I had a pretty good start. I was probably the number one first, second, and third year guy, but still, I'm struggling. My net worth is probably still 3 years out of school, I don't know, minus 50 grand if you don't count mortgages. I mean, just credit card debt and whatever. My parents didn't have any money, which again was probably a blessing, because if you have no backstop, then you have no choice. So you just go out and work. So I go to my first annual meeting in Milwaukee, and this is our expectation portion of our program, right? So I go to Milwaukee, and the thing that Northwest Mutual does that is masterful is, and it doesn't cost them anything, is everybody goes to the annual meeting in Milwaukee, they pay their own way, and they put these 20 guys up on the stage, right? And they call them their top 20. And these are the top 20 producers for the year. And they have these grown-ups, and look, I was just a kid, they have grown-ups killing each other in this competitive thing to be on that stage. And they're not on that stage and they get a free car. They're not on that stage and they get a $100,000 bonus. They're just on that stage and they have these ribbons. Well, I have an excuse that excited me because I was only 24. So, but what I remember looking at was there was a guy that was maybe 3 years older than me, and I had spoken to him earlier in the year. And my thought process always is that if somebody else can do something, then why couldn't I do something? So to me, I go there, I watch this thing, and I say, you know what? I think I should be there because I talked to that guy, and he's a few years older. I'm sure he's smarter, better educated, but I kind of figured out that doesn't really matter. I wrestled in high school. We're not that smart. You work a little bit harder, you're in a little better shape, you probably get it done. So anyway, I remember talking to my general agent at the meeting and asking him what he thought it would take to be in the top 20 the following year. And he gave me the numbers and how many lives he thought I would need to write in order to write a certain amount of premium in order to write a certain amount of volume. And I wrote it down on the back of the business card. Again, really sophisticated guy. It was me and an assistant. Put that business card, back of that business card, I carried it around on my daytimer, and I thought about it every day. And at night, I used to run then because I could. And when I would run at night, I would hear the guy that would make the announcement, I would hear myself being introduced on stage as a member of the top 20. I mean, now some people might say, this guy's out of his mind. Maybe I am, maybe I was. So my goal, I think that the goal was to do $26 million of volume. Doesn't really matter what that means. But at the end of the year, I did $26,400,000 of $400,000 of volume, and I was number 18. And I was the youngest member of the top 20, and I ended up staying there for quite a long time. So here's the thing. The day, 2 days before the final closing for the agent's year, I was in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, right? I was converting a life insurance policy to a guy named, Jose Manjon, because I knew I was really close. So what I would say is this. I had a goal. I thought about my goal. I bought into my goal. I knew what it was, right? And I knew what I had to do to do that. Most people, if you don't have a goal, I was in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania because I had a purpose. If I didn't write that down, if I didn't have a goal, I'm sure I would have been fine. I'm sure my fourth year I'd have been fine, and I might have been the best fourth year guy in the business, and maybe I'd have done half the business I did, right? But if you actually have a goal, if you have a purpose, if you write things down, and we're going to talk about that and how we track our numbers and knowing where you are. But life is so intentional. Everything about life is intentional. Nothing is happening by accident, right? They say things don't just happen, they happen just, and I believe that. So the biggest thing, and every time I talk to some, I was reading an article, and I don't know if it's financial news or whatever, and there's some UBS guy who's got $15 billion, and they run this family office out in California, and their average client's got like $1 billion and whatever. He's in the same game. I'm embarrassed by that, right? Because I have a good practice, but I'm so wimpy, and I'm so small thinking, right, that I'm only 3 hires away, I think, maybe 4, from having a practice like that. But because I'm comfortable, and sometimes you buy your own bullshit, or you just aren't around the right people, so to me, that's where the game is. So if you guys think that you look at my practice, or you look at someone like me or somebody else, I hope, and you say, well, I'm not, that's not me. I'm not a $1 billion producer. I'm a $500 million producer. I'm a $200 million producer, right? Then that's all you can ever be. That's a 100% guaranteed fact. If you look at me, or you look at somebody like me and say, if that guy can do it, then I can do it, then you're in business. Because that is a true statement. And then there's a bunch of things we got to figure out to get there. So this whole thing started about 20 years ago. I hired Paul Magistro, right? So Paul Magistro is my chief of staff, and we'll talk about staffing in a second. But I know it started then because before that, nobody on my team really understood, the business. We didn't have the capacity. And at that point, we realized that we were out there making pretty good money. I'm sure when I was 30, I'm sure I was making $1 million because I bought a house and somebody gave me a mortgage and it was really big. So, that's kind of where I was. I'm sure that at that point, I probably had a 0 net worth. But what I realized in my 30s was that we are capable of going out and finding people, clients, and building something. And we're starting to build infrastructure. But if we ever really want to make money, and if we ever really want to have a reasonable, life, and something that you can build and sit back and know that on January 1st, you have this revenue flow, and it's not just commission and you got to go out and do it again, which is really daunting, that we had to make a change. And the only way we could do that is if we built an infrastructure to support it. And so we started to bring on people, we brought on, and we'll talk about in a sec, I brought on Steve Kuhn, to run our investment group. We brought on Joe Gessler to run our planning group. I brought on Paul Magistro as my chief of staff, who was in the investment business, at a bank, not necessarily at a high level, but let me tell you, he knew a heck of a lot more than I did. My sort of philosophy about this whole thing is that I want to be the dumbest guy on my team. If I might want to be the leader of my team. I have to have the vision for my team. I have to direct my team. I have to set the example for my team. But I want to be literally, for what we do, I want to be the dumbest guy on my team. Because if I'm hiring people that don't know more than me, then I have not strengthened what I'm doing. I haven't strengthened my value proposition to my clients, and I haven't really helped my own cause. So the idea is that we've got to go out there and hire really smart people. The problem with hiring really smart people is they want to get paid, right? And I guess Henry Ford said, "A penny saved is a penny earned." And I think particularly in guys in our business, and my experience with my guys here, is that they really take that to heart, right? And we tend to be frugal. One of the things for me is that I never paid attention to expenses. Now that doesn't mean we should be foolish. But it was never about expenses. For years, and I've done 100 presentations and lots of seminars and whatever. And one of the things we always talk about is you do not have an expense problem in the business. And I'm not talking about your personal side, because I think personally people should try to be more frugal and smarter, because it creates too much pressure otherwise. I'm talking about just from the business standpoint. But from the business standpoint, it's never about expenses. It's about revenue. Right? So if you have an expense problem, it's not really about that. I remember guys complaining about the copier expense, or we used to have fax machines, or my manager is nickeling and diming me, and they're not, they're charging me for things, and they're all running around commiserating about how fucked up it is. And the reality is, it's not an expense problem. It's a revenue problem. If you make more money, and trust me, it's true, because I got divorced like 6 years ago. And my guys here know that this is true. And so when I got divorced, it was pretty expensive. Forget about getting cut in half, because that's just, everybody gets cut in half. But my costs on an annual basis, until I'm 70, is about, $1,250,000. About $1 million of it's deductible, and the balance is sort of just throw-ins that are not deductible. So the wonderful thing about our business, and the wonderful thing about our opportunity is that 2 years later, I'm ahead of the game, because my alimony is deductible, my old expenses weren't, and all I had to do, that was not a problem. I wasn't mad that I had to pay $1 million a year in alimony, because what am I getting mad about? That's just life. That's just the way things work, right? I knew that going in. So that wasn't really a problem. My only thing that I had to do, I just had to make an extra $1 million or $2 or $3 million bucks. And so over the last 5 years, I've increased my revenue by probably about $2.5 million bucks. She's deductible, that's $500,000, and I'm freaking way ahead of the game. Now, if I were an orthopedic surgeon, and if I were in a situation where every year the procedures I do are going down and down and down, or if I were talking to a software salesman yesterday, and this is so unfair, because all these people are so much smarter than I am. I mean, they might be smarter than some of you guys, but they're clearly smarter than me, and it just seems so unfair that I've got myself in a situation where all I've got to do is just keep leveraging my business, keep working, not necessarily harder, but just keep working, that I can make more and more and more. And if I can make the right sort of hires and increase the quality and be able to go after better people. And meanwhile, most of the world does not have that opportunity. So anyway, and we'll talk about that also. But so let's talk a little bit about what I think the activity is for sort of younger, because when I looked at the mix, I think we have some younger people, people that are maybe, 5 years or 10 years or whatever in the business. And then obviously there's some really big producers, that are on the line. And I'd like to apologize to you first, because you guys, some of you guys have really big numbers, and I appreciate you being on the phone today. I'm not sure if I can help you, because it looks like you're doing just fine without any of my help. But let's talk about what I think is important for, say, someone that might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, even under 10 years in the business. Again, activity is really the key to build a business. Once you have a business and you want to either maintain it or grow it, from there, then there's other things I think are more important. But you can't get away from basic activity. And if you don't have activity goals and you don't track your activity, it doesn't work. You have to know where you are at all times. I mean, there was a time where we were really big into referrals, and we would say, all right, everybody's got to get 5 referrals a day or 15 referrals a week, because we're not tough enough to cold call. I never cold call. I'm not that tough. I couldn't get on the phone and cold call. My feelings get hurt. I got to protect, my happiness. And so it was all about referrals. And we'd walk around, what's your number, right? We'd say, what's your number? And somebody say, my number's 10, because whatever your referrals for the week were. We got away from that naturally because it worked. And so when something works, you stop doing it because, that's what you do, right? It kind of makes sense. So anyway, there's a really good book that I might suggest people read, and it'll have something to do with activity. And if anyone ever read Outlier, Malcolm Gladwell, I guess, wrote the book. And what he did was he examined 10 really uber successful people in different fields. And he tried to identify what he thought the common traits were. And so to me, what I got out of the book was, and one of the things he talked about was, if you want to be successful, whatever it is you do, you have to become an expert. And the only way to become an expert is to put your time in. And I think in the book, he talked about 10,000 hours. And so I'm going to just kind of speaking to the younger, producers, right, or the younger advisors. So if you're a younger advisor, your goal is to get to your 10,000 hours as soon as possible. The problem with the business is, and one of the great things about the business is that it's flexible, right? So one of the things about our business, other than the fact that you've got this huge opportunity, is you have flexibility. So you've got the flexibility to be here for a couple hours this morning because you chose to, or you could have been someone that signed up and decided to go play golf this morning. You have that flexibility. You can be in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday, or you can show up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday. And for the most part, as long as your numbers are okay, I don't think most part nobody's bothering anybody because you kind of work for yourself. So to me, the difference between successful people or very successful people and not is that if you're thinking properly and you're successful, you use the flexibility to be the guy that puts in more time, not less time. So the way I looked at it when I started was, if I worked 6 days a week, not 5 days a week, then that means I can make more money, and I needed the money. So I would work Saturday mornings, and my ex-wife would say, it's snowing out, and you're going to have an accident, and what are you doing? And all I'm thinking is, I'm going to drive to New Brunswick. I'm going to sell a life insurance policy, and again, this is quite a long time ago. I'm going to make $3,000, which made a difference in my life at that time. And I'm going to drive home. I'm going to high-five myself, and I'm going to think, how awesome is this? That I actually can go out on a Saturday morning, and I can have a nice conversation with a nice couple, and I can make $3,000 and presumably have a client that I'll do things with for hopefully the next 30 years. And I just thought that was great. And I probably would have worked Sundays, but it would have been a bigger problem, and and I guess I would have been a freak, right? So I never worked Sundays. So there's two sides. So what I did, I think, was I got my 10,000 hours in in the first 5 years. So what happens, I think, that for people that either take too long or never really launch, is that if it takes you 20 years to get your 10,000 hours in, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. If you can get your 10,000 hours in as soon as possible, right, get them in up front, because by the time I was 5 or 6 years, I made so many mistakes. I got embarrassed so many times, and the great thing about making a mistake or getting embarrassed never happens again. So when somebody asked me for the very first time, are these numbers pro forma numbers? And I didn't know what pro forma meant, so I said, no, and they were. Guess what? I never made that mistake again, right? And I could think of a million things, in my life. And so the reality is you're never really learning when you win. You're always learning when you lose, right? You're always learning when you make a mistake. But if I could make, 1,000 mistakes quickly, right, then I was going to be that much more successful. And everybody's always heard, if you're going to be on the phone cold calling or whatever, your goal, it doesn't matter how many appointments you schedule. What your goal should be is every day have 100 people say no to you. If you can have 100 people say no to you every day, you'll make millions and millions of dollars. Because think about how many people you've got to call for 100 people to say no. And life's a numbers game. It's just a numbers game. It's just statistics. And if you call enough people, a few people say, yeah, I need that, or I don't have somebody, or yeah, come see me, right? And so if 100 people say no to me a day, then that means probably 5 people said yes, right? Because I just talked to all those people, and statistically, or maybe only 3. If 3 people say yes a day, you won't know what to do with that. That business will be so large you won't even know what to do with yourself, right? So anyway, so let's talk about activity for what I would consider the early years. So what I focused on, and again, what I wrote down and what I tracked every week was I wanted to schedule 2 new appointments a day. I always wanted to know that no matter what happened during the course of the day, if I made money, I didn't make money, whatever I thought was going to happen, and by the way, whatever I thought was going to happen never happened. It just doesn't, right? When I think I have the biggest opportunity, it's always shit, and when I had no expectation, it turns out to be something good. So you just kind of have to take it as it comes, right? So two appointments a day scheduled, so that I knew that if I scheduled 10 appointments every week, that means I could work next week. Because if I don't have appointments for next week, then I'm not working next week, right? And I think that consistency is really important. I wanted to see a new prospect every day. I just wanted to see somebody that I didn't know that wasn't my client every day. I'm not saying that I needed to have somebody buy something from me every day, but I wanted to see somebody every day. I wanted to take what we call a fact finder. I wanted to introduce myself to Dan, I wanted to ask Dan some questions, and I wanted Dan to give me the answers, and then I wanted to see if there was something that I could uncover. And if nothing else, at least I was practicing, right? So that was something that was really important. I wanted to get 5 referrals a day. Might have been the most important thing. Because if I didn't have people to call, then I didn't have a business, right? So as long as I continued to collect names, whether that was getting 5 referrals from Dan, the new guy I saw, whether that was making other phone calls to existing clients, whether that was whatever it was, I wanted to get 5 referrals every day. And I didn't get it every day, but you know the funny thing is when you try to do something every day and you fail, so I only got 3, or I only got 5 on 4 days, or I only got 4 on 4 days, right? But if I got 16, in a week, and probably 3 of those people agree to see me because my odds are greatly enhanced, right? Because you want to work with referrals, not non-referrals. All of a sudden, everything starts happening, right? And the reason I did that, and you say, well, how could you do that? Because my expectation was that I would. Because at the end of every appointment, and because I remember I'm 24 years old, I'm 25 years old, I'm not smart, I have no freaking idea. I only know what I read in a book or someone told me, because that's all I know. And somebody told me that when you finish an appointment, what you say is, Dan, do you have any questions for me? And I don't know Dan. Dan doesn't know me. And Dan says, no, I'm good. I said, well, Dan, you might wonder how I get paid. And again, I swear to God, I did this for years and it worked. I don't do it anymore because it worked, and fortunately, I don't necessarily have to, but I probably should. And he'd say, yeah, I was curious. Well, if I can sell you a life insurance policy or disability policy, and again, these are in the earlier years, I'm talking to like young doctors and whatever, I get paid a commission. But the second way that I get paid, and most importantly, is by referral. And whenever I sit down with somebody for the first time, I always get 5 referrals. And people are weird, right? So we're basically all sheep, right? We are. I mean, just watch what's going on in the world today. Everybody's just repeating everything that they hear and everything else, and we're just sheep, right? So Dan's processing, he's never been through this process. Dan doesn't know what the rules are, right? Dan just knows he doesn't want to buy any insurance. That's all Dan knows. Like he's like, shit, this guy's making sense. I'm gonna have to buy something until he's all nervous. He's got his own problems, right? So and then I just shut up. I turn my fact finder over and I'm just looking at Dan. And Dan's like, shit, I think maybe I'm supposed to do this. Maybe this is what everybody does. And about half the time, I'd get this and then I have to ask again. And half the time he'd say, well, I don't know whether they're interested. And I'd say, oh, no, not looking to see whether people are interested or not. That wasn't my question. I just want to meet some people you know. And I'd get the other 3 residents in the program or the 2 fellows or whatever. And then now we've gotten much more sophisticated. So we'll go there with a list, because I know where Dan works and I know people he knows, or we're LinkedIn or whatever. And I might say, Dan, this is how I get paid. I have 5 names or 10 names or 15 names here that I'm interested that look like people I might like to meet. They're in your LinkedIn. Do you know these people? And now everyone's thinking, well, wait a minute. That's against the rules, right? Because you don't even know this guy. And he hasn't done anything. And remember, though, and my silly way of thinking is, I went out and met Dan. I had a really good conversation. I asked Dan a bunch of questions. I probably told him a few things he didn't already know. And I'm going to come back, and I'm going to tell him what he should do and what he needs to do. And he might or might not buy it. Maybe it's 50-50. And I'm going to do the work, right? And I might not get paid. Well, I don't know. I kind of feel like that's worth something. It's 5 names. I could have asked him for $500 for the consultation, but it just seemed to me that 5 names are free. And if you can square that away in your mind, that even if they're not your client, but if you have an intelligent conversation with somebody and you go through a process with somebody and you can help them, even if they don't do whatever it is you ask them to do, if you think that you should be paid for that, then I think maybe you will. So I wanted to get 5 referrals a day. And then I wanted to ask somebody to buy something every day. Because I figured if I asked somebody to buy something every day somebody wasn't going to buy something for me. But if I asked every day, maybe every other day, maybe twice a week, and if I could get someone to buy something for me twice a week, just again, based on the numbers, I'd stay in business. And as my prospects got bigger, as my accounts got bigger, then I would make more and more money. So here's the thing though, and yeah, he's got it there. So I said minimum, right? These aren't maximum expectations. These were minimum expectations. And I think that the thing that's so important about what we do and about our thought process and about our goals is that the problem that everybody has is that you have a couple of good months, right, and everything's good and you're comfortable, and then we slow down, right? And then the bank account gets low, or we're getting pressure from our manager or whatever, and then we pick it up again, and then we slow down. And that just seems to be the average, sort of pace of the average person, in our business, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me. So to me, if I had a day off, or if I had a day where I wasn't seeing anybody, I would be on the phone all day. Because if I go to work that day, if I'm at work, then I'm present and I'm working. I'm not reading the paper. I don't read the Wall Street Journal every day. I don't read a lot of anything every day. Because, it sounds terrible, but I pay people to do that. So the smartest guy in the world that I know is Peter Bookvar. And, Peter writes every day. He's my chief investment officer. And I read Peter's stuff, the really condensed Reader's Digest version of what's going on in the world. And since I only understand half of it, I go down to his office 3 times a day. And I say, hey, could you just explain this to me, or could you explain that to me, or why is this happening, or why is that happening? And it's a great thing because I have the luxury, because I'm willing to pay for it. So I pay to have a really, really, really smart guy, 6 or 7 doors down from me, that can tell me, what I need to do, so I don't have to spend the whole day reading, so that I can feel like I'm smarter than my clients, so I can go out there and have that conversation, which makes no sense to me at all, not as a business person. So minimum activity. So if I could have 3 meetings in a day or 4 meetings a day, that's awesome, right? So, the study that, or the way we look at this, so I have a twin brother, right? We joined the business together at the same time. Scott dresses better, he's a better dancer. So, he was very, very successful salesperson in college. It was unbelievable. And he's a very, very successful advisor. But his business and my business are very, very different. And part of it's been choice, but I think that the difference between a really big producer and an average producer is not working twice as hard. It's consistency, right? It's consistency, and it's about 10% additional effort. If you work 10% harder on a consistent basis, not every other day, so if your benchmark and your baseline is to hit your goals, your activity targets, or whatever those targets are every day, and you work 10% harder than everybody else, you'll have twice the business. And I found that, and that's kind of how it's all turned out. Do you have a question? Or?
Yeah. So the activity goals that you had as a new advisor, are they exclusive to transactional life insurance business, or are they translatable to wealth management?
It's all the same. Look, we're in the client collection business, right? That's all this is, right? So we're going to talk in a second about what the platform looks like, what the business model looks like. But when you break it down to its simplest form, we're in the client collection business, right? So we go out there and collect clients. If you're smart, you're in the client collection maximization of income client collection business, right? And if you're really smart, you're going to be in sort of this holistic, planning-based, do everything for these people. And again, we'll talk about this for a whole host of reasons. Not the least is maximization of income, right? Because the more things you do for clients. So I would do this the same if I sold insurance only, which is insane. God, shoot me, please, if I had to do that. I would do this if I were investment only, but that doesn't make sense to me either. But I would certainly do the same if it were a holistic practice. Because again, this isn't about what I'm selling. There's nothing in here about it. I didn't say I wanted to sell X amount of life insurance policies. It doesn't matter what I'm selling. I'm collecting clients. So if I can get 5 referrals, and if I can have 10 meetings a week, or if I can have 5 closes a week, I could be selling pet insurance, in 5 years. It won't matter because I'm going to have 400 people that trust me, that I'm their advisor, and if nobody wants to do anything in the world other than buy insurance for their pets, in 2030, all right, I'll make a living selling pet insurance. I hope that's not the case. I can't imagine it'll be as lucrative, but it doesn't matter. We're in the client collection business, and the way you collect clients is by activity. That's the way you collect clients, because they're not calling. At least they don't call me, or sometimes, but not enough. If we're more established, and what my practice looks more like is I spend a lot of time on the phone, so I do reviews, right? I have, that billion, 3 or 4, whatever it is, has to be talked to. It has to be serviced, right? I have to, stay in touch with these people. So, I want to have my minimum, and if I only have 5 reviews in a day, unless I'm out in the office seeing new people or closing business, I'm annoying as hell because I am bored to tears. Because 5 reviews is like 2.5 hours. And I don't know, maybe some people can be reviewing and pontificating and thinking and whatever, but that's not me. Other people do my work. I review it the night before. If the work is good, I get on, I read the news. I read the news for half an hour. If I don't have a meeting for another hour or two, there's not a whole lot for me to do because I'm not processing the work. I'm not the analyst. I'm not the analyst. I'm not the anything. I'm just the CEO. I'm just the guy directing the flow, right? Everybody else that works for me is doing all the work. And that's something we have to get to, because what I find is if we're bored, if we have nothing else to do, then maybe we'll do the things that we get paid to do. And again, the things we get paid to do are talk to the money, right? Talk to the clients and find new ones. That's what we get paid to do. I get paid to process and close clients, right? That's my business. And everything else is someone else is supposed to be doing. And when you think about what I make an hour, and even though I pay my people very well and some of them make hundreds of thousands of dollars, it still makes no sense for me to be doing anything that somebody else could do. And then what we just do, and we'll look at staffing in a second, we just pay attention to our ratios. And as long as your ratios are in line, then you're fine. And the more people I hire, the smarter people I hire, the more brain power I bring in, the more money I make. Because it used to be that I thought $1 million file was a good file. And then I thought a $2 million file was a good file. And then I thought a $3 million file was a good file. Now, I'll take it. And, maybe I'll let one of the juniors run it, right? But now I want the file to be a $5 million or $10 million file. And it's really not fun until it's a $20 million file. Because then now I'm a little bit, I know I'm working now. I know that I'm competing with, real people. I know that when I win that file, I know that we are where we belong, and I know that we did, we've accomplished something, we built something, that we can feel really good about, so.
I know we're going to talk about some of the things that you track in a minute
Yeah.
on the revenue side.
Yep.
Can you just talk a little bit about what your typical activity looks like? And
Yeah.
you didn't get there overnight, right? So
Yeah. Well, look, in the beginning, I did exactly what I suggest young advisors do. I worked all the time. I worked 5 days a week. I was in the office early. I worked evenings, and when I worked, I worked. And if I got blown out in the day, I got on the phone. The tough part about our business in the beginning is that you kind of wake up unemployed every day, which is kind of frustrating, right? Because most jobs you get paid, you go to work, and there's something for you to do. Your job is, I used to make phone calls on Sunday nights. I remember sitting on my in-laws, and sitting on their bed on a Sunday night and making like welcome wagon calls, and I hated it. I would get nauseous by like 4 o'clock in the afternoon because I knew I had to go in there and do that. But if I didn't get on the phone and make calls on Sunday night to kind of fill in my schedule, then I really I wasn't working the following week. And if I'm not working the following week, I'm not building anything, right? It's like, look, life is a sum total of all its little parts. And it's great when, someone wins an Olympic gold medal and they're like, wow, what a great race you ran. And I'm sure if you ask that person, are you freaking kidding me? What a great race I ran. Now, let me tell you about the last 4 years. Let me tell you about when I was running up and down the field pulling like, a 50 or 100-pound sled, right? Let me tell you about the injuries. Let me tell you about all the trials and tribulations to get here. The race is 9 seconds, yeah, it's great, but that's not what that's about. Looking at your numbers, I'm going to have a really big year this year. My year this year will have nothing to do necessarily with anything that I did this year. My year will have everything to do with everything I've done in the last 15 years, maybe 20. A client I've been working with for 10 years sold the business. I get $25 million. That has nothing to do with this year, right? That has to do with 10 years ago when I got that client, right? And you got, it just happens over and over and over again. And so no matter how small you think all these little things are you're doing, it's directing your business. It's directing your whole life, right? Every little decision you make, every time you have to either go this way or you have to go this way, you're making a choice. Do I go fishing or do I go to work? Do I take Friday off and go to the beach, or do I work the morning and get my calls in? Because my schedule isn't what it should be next week. If my schedule is full next week, then by all means go. But if it's not, or do I make calls tonight, or do I go home? What do I do? And they're all innocuous little decisions, right? Every little decision. Do I, I'm kind of tired, I'm going to blow that appointment off, I'm going to reschedule it. The client won't care. Yeah, the client won't care. Don't see him today, see him next week. But then you just wasted a slot, and you just, you kind of you've falsely filled a slot for next week, right? So to me, all of that stuff has a direct impact. It's accumulating. It's like this geometrical sort of process to get you to wherever it is you ultimately get to. And you didn't get there by accident. And it wasn't by luck. Yeah, we get lucky sometimes, but the harder you work, the luckier you get. You can't get away from it. And if you're not willing to work, this whole thing can't work unless you join somebody else, or your dad's an advisor, or whatever it is. So that's a better way, I guess. Making your money the old-fashioned way, inheriting it, I would never knock it. It sounds great to me. It just wasn't my lot. So now, I probably have 7, 8 appointments scheduled a day. So I come into the office. My files are on my desk. I looked them over. They emailed them to me the day before. So I was comfortable. So in case I wanted to make any changes, I need to own my file so I can have an intelligent conversation with the client. So typically there's kind of 8 calls. I might have a couple of face-to-face meetings, although 90% of our meetings are over the phone. And then obviously scattered in the week, I want to have a couple of opportunities a week where I'm actually pitching some business. So that's sort of a typical kind of a day for me. I mean, obviously I'm getting the same 50 or 100 emails a day that you guys are getting. The difference for me though is I'm not answering most of them unless it's like a real problem that somebody needs to talk to me. But someone needs money wired, somebody has something, somebody needs something with their lawyer, their accountant, whatever. I have a chief of staff who basically does air traffic control for everything. And then, but I always watch my email flow, because if a client has a problem, then I want to talk to that client. Every time somebody has a problem, it's an opportunity for me, right? It's an opportunity for me to let them know that I care about them. So Tuesday night, it's like 9 o'clock, I'm reading my emails, and a very, very not big client, but a client I've had a long time, he's a nice guy. And I get this email at 9 o'clock at night, I'm just kind of watching TV. And it says, hey, could you please call me first thing in the morning? We're having a big problem, and I'm under time pressure. So I just called him. I'm not going to wait till tomorrow. I mean, I don't have office hours. I mean, these people are how I make my living. I work for them. So I call him, and he got involved in a screwy real estate situation, and he needed some advice and whatever. But when I get off the phone at 9:30 with him, and he thanks me 4 times, that was an opportunity for me. And every time I get an email on a Sunday, because I have one of these nutty clients that work too much and they can't pay attention to anything until it's Sunday, I'll call them or I'll answer their emails. I always answer those emails if I can. And half the time my staff's watching as well, and I can't answer the email because they know more about the details than I do. They'll answer the email. And every time that happens, like people would sometimes, my ex would get annoyed, like whatever. And I'm like, no. This should not be annoying to us. This is an opportunity for us. This is our opportunity to show them that we are different from everybody else, that we're engaged with them, and that they're the most important thing for us. So anyway, you have a question?
No.
Okay. So activity that I think that we should be tracking. Again, we need to be tracking referrals. We need to be tracking new households. So you're a $100 million, a $200 million, a $400 million producer, and congratulations for that, because obviously that was a lot of work and it's a great job. But my observation is this: no client that you own is yours. Right? You're just renting them. Hopefully you can rent them for 30 years, but they're not yours. You don't own them. Someone is out there every day, trying to take them from you. So I would say that, and we'll talk about that too, but so I would say that if your practice isn't growing, it's shrinking, right? Because every now and then I lose this client out of left field, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I've worked with that guy for 25 years, and you never know what's going on, what the rationale is, what the circumstances are. People get divorced, people die, money is definitely leaving. So we'll look next at how I track my numbers. But you have to be bringing in new households, and you have to be bringing in money. So my thing is, minimum new households has to be 2 a month. If you're not bringing in 24 households a year, new households, then your business is not growing. It's not, you're not going to grow this thing, and you're certainly not going to maximize, what your potential is. And if you don't write that down, if you don't track it, if it's not a goal, it's not going to happen. It's not just going to happen. And then the second thing is, my first one yesterday, until my brother reviewed my notes and told me to change it, I was going to say, $5 million a month minimum, $10 million a month is what I'm really hoping for. But I would say that's probably a little higher than it needs to be. But $2 to $3 million a month of new net assets is what an advisor that has capacity, that's 10 or 15 years or more in the business, that you should really, that should be a no-brainer. And there's a couple ways you can do that. I mean, look, I think one good way to guarantee that you're going to have decent flow is any clients that you have that make good cash flow, you should have them on automatic investment plans. $10,000 a month, $15,000 a month, $20,000 a month. Because if somebody's giving you $20,000 a month, it's $240,000 a year. If you have if you have 50 people were giving you $20,000 a month, do the math. You kind of take care of a lot of your flow issue or your collection issue just on automatic, contributions. And it could be $1,000 a month, it could be $2,000 a month, but everybody that's saving money, and you ask people, what can you save? And they tell you, they go, well, look, I think, forced savings is the best thing I can help you with. Let's set it up on an automatic basis and your dollar cost averaging. And if it gets tight, we'll change it. And so, we have sort of this automatic amount of money that's being, kind of coming into the business because we have a lot of that. And then the other thing is just, we've got to be out there, collecting money. And, you get lucky sometimes. So if that month where, your client sold their business or, whatever, that's great, and you can feel really good about that, and you're getting paid for something you did years earlier, but you better find your 2 new households. Because the problem is, we're doing well, things are great, but not because of our activity or not because of our work effort. And so we slow down, and then 6 months later, all of a sudden, nothing's happening. And then just as easily as you can get lucky and somebody can give you a bunch of money, somebody can take away a bunch of money. And all of a sudden your pipeline's not great, you don't have a lot of new activity out there, you don't have a lot of closes, scheduled, and all of a sudden, you're down. And so again, the most important thing about all of this is consistency. My younger brother Bart was in our business for about 10 years, and he's 4 years younger. And they used to call him Bart Smith, because Bart was really smart and really nice, and he played rugby. And he would come in every Monday morning, his face would be swollen. You could still smell the alcohol, right? Because he was a man's man, and he's a great guy, and everybody loved Bart. And it kills me that he left, because, even today, if he just would have stayed, he'd be making 3 times more money, just being Bart. But anyway, we used to, I wasn't his boss, but he worked in a firm and I was the partner, and he's my brother. So, we would sit down and do his annual reviews, and I just remember sitting down with him, and we'd be sitting down November. If you're sitting down in November and you're reviewing your numbers, you've already lost. Yeah, because I got news for you. November, the only thing that you'd be sitting down for in November is planning for Thanksgiving dinner and maybe your Christmas shopping list. Because if you're looking at your stuff in November, the year's over and you've lost it because you can't get that back. I like to think that when I'm halfway through January, I like to be looking at what's going on and say, okay, am I on track? Because January is always tough, right? We've been off, we had the Christmas break, things kind of slow down, and now it's time to get started again. And then at the end of the month, I'm looking at this stuff every month. I kind of like to think of keeping in touch with your activity as like keeping in touch with your weight, right? So I weigh myself. Again, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. Probably already think I'm a little crazy. I weigh myself every day, right? And I weigh myself every day because there is a correlation between my behavior and my weight, right? So if I'm eating French fries and fried chicken and ice cream, and I do that for a couple of days, okay, and I'm drinking too much, I become fat guy, right? And there is a direct correlation between alcohol, ice cream, hamburgers, which is all my favorite food, French fries, and being, 10 pounds heavier than I want to be. If I'm focused and I'm exercising and I'm eating properly, then my weight's where I want it to be. If I don't weigh myself for 2 weeks, and especially if I just wear bigger pants, right, then I feel fine. So I'll wear my 33s, not my 32s. I feel fine. I wear a bigger shirt, not a smaller shirt. I feel fine. Then I get on a scale 2 weeks later. Fine, I'm 10 pounds heavier. How'd that happen? Right? Your business is the same. You don't pay attention to your activity, you're not tracking anything, you're not focused on anything, you wake up, it's November, and you're like, oh my God, how'd that happen? I just lost a year, right? You can't do that. It's gotta be on it, you gotta be focused on it, you gotta be watching this stuff. It's like I used to talk about the idea that every day that I got up, I wanted to push the rock up the hill. And I knew that I wasn't gonna get to the top of the hill, but if I could just move that up a little bit every day, then that was a good day. And if I didn't do anything that day, that's not a good day. And just because somebody phoned in, $1 million, I mean, yeah, I'll take the money and it's helpful, but that doesn't make it a good day because that was just somebody phoning in. It had nothing to do with what I was doing. So anyway, the most important thing is consistency because the problem isn't the big months. Big months are great, but that's not the problem. The problem is bad months, right? It's the zero. So if I want to do, let's say you want to do $3 million a month of fresh net collected assets, not gross, net, outs and ins, right? Well, if I have a month at zero, then that means next month I've got to do 6 million. Net. If I do zero in January and February because I had my head up my ass and I wasn't paying attention because I'm just so high-fiving myself because I was so awesome last year, right? So yeah, I'm high-fiving. And I wake up in March and I basically put nothing on the board. I'm not 3 million a month now. I need a $9 million a month. Well, now all of a sudden, the $9 million a month's a little problem. There's an old expression, you can eat an elephant one bite at a time, and it's 100% true. When I wrote my goals down for top 20, and I said, I'm looking at this, there's no way I can do $26 million of, it's too big, right? I think I did 13 million the year before. So I said, okay, I can't do that. So I said, okay, well, what would that be, weekly, right? Or I'm sorry, what would that be monthly? So it was like, 2.5 million a month. Still seems a little scary to me. So then I said, okay, well, what would that be weekly? And it was like $550,000, $600,000 of volume a month or a week. And I said, you know what? I think I might be able to do that. And then every week, I didn't have an annual goal. I had a weekly goal. And if I didn't do $550,000 that week, then that means I had to do $1 million the next week, right? And you just keep, right? And you just keep tracking it. And the most amazing thing happens when you focus on something and you watch it and you track it. It happens. It's kind of crazy. Okay. Do we?
You want to show them your?
Yeah. So let's look at how I track it. I mean, there's nothing sophisticated about it. But the most important thing is, and I don't know if everybody does this. So this is so far this year. So the deposits are money that comes in. So it could be new clients, could be existing clients. I don't track that here. Here, what I'm just trying to track is the health of my my revenue flow. Just like any business that tracks their revenue, reporting earnings, reporting your growth. I'm just reporting my growth. So January was a little slow. February was good. March was good. April was great, and May was great. Got lucky in a couple of things in April and May. A couple of new client acquisitions. But here's the more important number. Okay, because that's great. Look at the withdrawals. So I lost a couple of clients in March and April. Out of the blue, too, by the way. I mean, would have never, if you said you're going to lose 3 clients and you gave me a list of 100, these guys would have probably been like number 90 and below. I mean, completely out of left field for all kinds of different reasons. And then we track, obviously, advisory, we net it out, and then the fees that are associated with that. And that's really what matters. And it doesn't include our, we don't really do any brokerage, but it doesn't include my 401k business, which is actually pretty robust. So we get a couple, we're certainly collecting, 2, 3, 4 million a month just on that business.
And think about if you weren't bringing new stuff in.
Right, yeah, so right, exactly. So Vince said, so look, I've got a big business, I'm pretty financially secure. If I wanted to take the year off, I pay my bills. I mean, I start the year with more money than I need, even with my obligations. So I decide that, this is the year where we're going to take off and we're going to do whatever, forgetting about the fact that if I'm not here, what's going to happen to my business. But all of a sudden, my withdrawals are huge. My business has shrunk by $38 million, plus whatever the market, had done. At least if I were looking at this thing, at the end of May, I would have been panicked, absolutely panicked. But the reality is, look, we don't own these files, and it's just part of the business. Whether it's a personal change on their end, whether it's something that happens, it's not in our control, and it's not personal. But yes, Dan?
What's the difference between the deposit column and the advisory column?
Yeah, because sometimes the deposit could be we're holding cash for somebody. What we'll do is we'll hold cash and dollar cost average in, so we're not going to count that until we actually start feeing it. The advisory column is what we're actually billing on.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay?
And then the aggregate.
Yep. And then, and so we track the aggregate. Now, the aggregate is without my my 401k business, my pension business, which is probably, about 400 to 500 million. It's advisory. It's obviously not as, my average fee on that's lower because they tend to be larger. But this is just, again, what I call my retail my retail advisory business. And this is just, what we're tracking. And, and again, obviously market has something to do with it. If the market's up 20% and we're up, 10, that's not reflective of you doing anything. So I'm not interested in congratulating myself because my business is up 5% or my book is up 5% because the market's up. And I'm not going to kill myself because it's down either because I don't control that. Okay. All right, any questions before we...
Only question now is, can we get the slides? We'll talk about that later.
Okay. All right. So let's I think I've beat the expectation. Life's fought between the years to death. So let's talk about attitude. And look, we're in a tough business. We're in a tough business because we do something that we can't really control. The markets are down. They're down. In May, it's uncomfortable. I mean, how about December, November, December? How about if any of you guys were in the business in 08 and 09? Let me tell you, I called my clients. I was on the phone all day, every day, until my clients finally said, listen, it's okay. You don't have to call. Keep calling. It's not your fault, right? I mean, we were panicked. We're reading books. We read a book. It was called, what was the book, guys? It was called...
The Pope.
Yeah,
Ferrari.
The monk that drove a Ferrari.
Yes.
Yeah, the monk that drove a Ferrari. Yeah, that was. Yeah, we made everybody read the book. It was like one of these positive thinking, and everybody's got the monk that drove the Ferrari with them. But so two things that help me kind of maintain a positive attitude. The first is I wake up every day and I feel lucky, right? So think about it. I wake up every day and I feel lucky. And you can feel lucky for a whole host of reasons, and it's none of my business what makes you feel lucky. But I have my own, sort of list of why I'm lucky. And I'm lucky for, lots of reasons. And I just kind of, my eyes open, and, and we're always thinking a million miles an hour and what we have to do that day and what our problems are. And we tend to focus, I live with a life coach, and she always uses this example that we tend to focus. Imagine you're looking at a white piece of paper, a big white piece of paper, and there's one dot in the middle of the paper. And that dot represents a problem. That dot represents something, right? I mean, and what we all tend to focus on is the dot. So everything in the white is good. Everything in the white is fine. But we can't focus on the white because we're so focused on the dot. It's like, and I think that's kind of human nature. So what I try to do is I try to avoid human nature I beat myself to the punch every day. So I wake up, I go through my inventory, right? Before I start thinking about who I don't want to see today, or who's the pain in the ass client, or the market's down again, or I don't know what the hell I'm, to do with all this. So I think about it, and I have healthy kids. I live with a wonderful woman. I have a great relationship with my ex-wife. She's a good client. And the craziest thing is I find myself, professionally in a situation where I have this unlimited financial opportunity. I actually do something, that has value. So think about how crazy that is. Like, there's lots of people that can make money doing whatever they're doing. People, they build a tech company, they sell it, they're billionaires, whatever. But, we do something every day that has a positive impact on the people that we serve every day. Justin and I were talking, he was coming in this morning and they had a meeting with a client yesterday. And, these people have this sort of financial issue. And, my partner, Reed Finney, and Justin are talking to these people and they are helping them with this issue. And this is a very important issue for them and they need leadership. And I hope you guys respect that and are leading your clients. You're not just following or going along or appeasing these people. They need leadership. They need people to tell them when they're doing something, that's not financially prudent. There's lots of conversations that we should be having with our clients every day that are not necessarily related to investments. And so to me, how great is it that I am a trusted advisor to hundreds of people, who really appreciate what I do, and I get paid so much money to do that. And I just can't imagine anybody that has a business or profession that can be luckier than we are. And so if I wake up like that and it's raining and I have to go to New York, okay, whatever, but remember, I'm already lucky. So it's hard to feel bad when you feel lucky. I don't think the two things can coexist. And then the other thought I wake up with, and this might seem to be a little bit oxymoronic, I wake up paranoid. I am paranoid. I believe that my clients have choices. My clients are not with me because there aren't, 1,000 other advisors, in the direct metropolitan area. And I'm talking about good advisors. Nice job today. That Peter Bookfar just came in, our CIO. He hosted CNBC this morning. And, Joe Kieran is such a pain in the ass. He is such a pain in the ass. Yeah, but anyway, you did a nice job. So, where am I? Peter, come on, you're distracting me. So I wake up paranoid because I kind of get the joke. And I think one of the problems that people have when they become very successful is they start to buy their own bullshit. I picked up a great file about 3 years ago. I had lunch with the guy on Tuesday. We had the greatest conversation. It's a $10 million file. He gives me like $1.5 million a year. He's a really wonderful guy. And I remember he was referred to me by his law school roommate, who actually was my client. And when I left Northwestern, I lost him because he had a relationship with the guy that brought me in. So it's kind of weird. And I get this phone call from the guy referring me, who wasn't even really my client. And I said to him, whenever I sit down with somebody to do a fact finder, I always ask them, well, why are you sitting down with me? Because you obviously have an advisor, right? You have a relationship. And, and I think it could be helpful to ask. And he said, he was working with a Bernstein guy. And he said, I'm just sick and tired of this condescending attitude that I get from my advisor. And it was so funny because I knew the guy, and the guy's a total asshole. And so, and then I make a note to myself, try not to be a condescending asshole to this guy because he doesn't appreciate that. Like everyone else loves to talk to condescending assholes, right? But yeah, so one thing I would say is if you're really, really successful and, and you're killing it and everybody's telling you how awesome you are and, you have so much money and that makes you better somehow in our society, don't buy that. Don't buy your own bullshit. Realize that these people have choices, that the reason that they'll stay with you and they want to be with you is because they trust you and because you work for them. And people that pretend that they know what's going to happen, people that pretend, like I always tell people, here's the good news. I'm not the smartest guy, I have a great team, but the good news is I'm never going to blow you up. And you know why I'm never going to blow you up? Because I don't think I'm that smart. Right? So I'm not the guy that's going to tell you, oh, let's get out. Oh, let's get into the market. Oh, let's load up over here, load up over there. Let's make big bets because I'm so smart, because I'm not. And therefore, you're safe, right? Because we all go out into the world and we see people that have been completely blown up because these idiot advisors think that somehow it's about how smart they are and, and their financial and investment acumen, right? So anyway, so those are my two thoughts I wake up in the morning. Okay. And then the only other thing I would say about being positive, and the reason it's important because obviously it just affects everything, it affects your interactions, is just be careful about what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, and who you hang around with, right? Because if you're hanging around with a bunch of negative people, it's really not helpful, So hang around with positive people, get rid of negative people. I think in your offices, if that guy wants to come in and complain about whatever they're complaining about, or that guy wants to complain about whatever, don't talk to them. Shut your door. Or find a more positive place to work, but it definitely impacts, it impacts you, and I think it's really important. And then again, just kind of try to read good stuff, try to stay positive. All right, do you want a break here, or?
Yeah, we can break for questions and take a quick break before we
Okay.
get to the next piece.
Okay.
Any questions in the room? Go ahead.
When did you start having a minimum for your clients?
Yeah.
And how important is that?
Yeah.
And when do you feel comfortable upping it? How
Yeah.
does that work?
Yeah. So, okay. So the question is, when did I start having minimums? Maybe even the first question would be, do I have minimums, right? And how do you do that? And so, yeah, I definitely have minimums. I really, if you have a file, if it's got huge potential, right, but it starts out small, anybody should or can and should take that file. Now, I have the benefit because I'm here, and we have so many people here, and I've got 2 advisors on my team and all of you guys, so that if I'll go out and I'll talk to anyone initially on the phone. And if it's a good person with some potential, but it's too small for me, I can dish it off. And I will. I don't want to work a file less than a couple $1 million unless there is real potential.
When did you start off at $1 million, or did
Yep.
you start off?
No,
at
I mean,
100,000?
listen, I start off like everybody else. If they had $100,000, the problem I think for people is, and we got to figure this out, we're all competitive because whether we want to recognize it or not, you're a financial advisor, you're a financial genius, you're a financial whatever you think you are, but at the end of the day, you're a salesperson, right? We are in the client acquisition business. We go out there and we basically sell people our services. We charge them a fee. We're salespeople. And that's how, I'm the salesperson and the CEO of my organization, right? That's me, right? So unfortunately, salespeople like to win, right? We're competitive. And so we sort of get that, that high, every time someone says, yes, I want you to be my advisor, here's $25,000. Well, something everybody has to realize really early is that's a really bad model, right? Because you can't take these small files because it's not profitable. So what I would say is if someone doesn't have real potential, as far as to build into at least $1 million file, we don't want them. And as soon as you can do that, the better. Because here's the other problem. If you're taking on a bunch of these small files, you're busy. You're winning. You think it's okay, right? Oh, look, my calendar's full. Oh, look, Andy said I needed 2 new households. I got 5 new households, right? But unfortunately, I borrowed him $400,000, right? And it doesn't work. I mean, I had this conversation with one of our guys the other day. I think he's mad at me still, right? But I'm like, what the hell are you doing, right? So if you have the capacity, it's mental. If you're talking to $400,000 files, you're talking to $400,000 files because that's where you're confident and comfortable, right? And that's ridiculous because the people that know as little as you know, and you know a lot, but the people that know a fraction of what you know are those people that have $1 million file, that client who's unattended, maybe they're retiring, whatever. And if you're not busy servicing $50,000 and $100,000 files, right, then either you're lazy or you're going to say, hey, I got nothing else to do. I better go out there and talk to somebody that has $1 million. If you talk to these small files, if you take comfort in these small files, if you keep yourself busy in these small files, then you're really kidding yourself. But yeah, everybody has to have a minimum. And your file really, what you should be looking for $1 million files. $500,000 minimum, because you have to ask yourself, what's the profit margin? And a $200,000 file, that's someone that's putting in $2,000 a month, what's the profit margin? And by the way, they're going to bother you more. My $10 million files don't bother me. You know why? They're too busy. Rich people are busy, right? $200,000 files, I bet they're not that busy. That money, they're watching that money, and they're calling and bothering you.
So the reason why I asked you before about the life insurance.
Yeah.
Building.
Hey Danny, send me the smaller ones, I'll take the smaller ones.
No.
So, maintaining activity as a life insurance business.
It's all the same.
But it is, but if you're prospecting $1 million clients.
Yep.
Are you still maintaining the level of activity prospecting $1 million clients? And growing your business?
So you're saying, are you still sticking to the activity levels when
Yeah,
you're just focusing
sure,
on that area? There's
sure,
plenty of them.
sure. I mean, my activity expectation is smaller than it was 20 years ago, right? But I want to find two new clients a month that are at, say, 3 to 20 million, right? Because I want to be able to collect a minimum of $5 million to $6 million a month just to keep my thing even, net, right? So yeah, what's the difference? It's no different. There's so much money out there. It's all in your head. There's so much money out there. Think about it. So a $500,000 IRA rollover, which nobody wants, right? I mean, I'm not interested. The people that are on the phone that have big practices, they're not interested, right? That money is for anybody who wants it. If I get 3 or 4 $500,000, 401k rollovers, IRA rollovers, whatever, that's $2 million a month. Now I'd rather do more, and I'd rather get $2 million files, but I can certainly get to $2 million a month. I just need 4 transactions, 500,000 or above. If I'm doing 400,000 transactions, I'm just as busy, but I'm not making any money. I'm not making any money. But I'm kidding myself that I'm busy, because I'm talking to people that all say, yeah, I'll give you my money. Dan, I've been looking for an advisor. Of course you have, because nobody wants you, right? And I don't mean to be like rude or whatever, but nobody wants them because it's not profitable. It's not profitable. So you got to get out there and you got to compete with other people for the files that people want. But the $500,000 file, nobody really wants those files. You're not competing against anybody that's at your class, that has your capacity. You're not. Yeah, you're definitely not.